Hello and welcome to the Pod Sounds Cool podcast, the podcast that aims to help you improve your podcast and gets into the lifestyle and struggles of podcasters. This is your host, Veronica, and here with me is my sidekick, Pain in the Ribs Studio Steve.
Hey, Podski.
I'm the social media, branding, and content strategies for the Pod Sounds Cool.
And I'm the producer and creative director, and we're here to teach you skills, to hopefully inspire you, and to also share some tools with you to help your podcast sound better and go places.
In this episode, I decided to interview Studio Steve because I know that there's a lot of you who are thinking about starting your podcast very soon. And I'm just going to take the seat and ask all the questions that you guys may have as far as audio production and podcast production, because he's an expert in audio production. So I thought I would put him in the hot seat and ask all the questions for you. Okay, so the first question I have, and this is something that we've been asked a lot, is let's say that I am new to podcasting. I'm just starting to do my research and I have this idea of starting my podcast very soon. What piece of equipment or what pieces of equipment do I need to start my podcast? I've been reading blogs and I've been watching videos and there's just so many. And I want you to be specific and I want you to give me brands. I want you to give to be specific, and I want you to mention brands, and just to direct me to what I need, so I don't have to go anywhere else.
Okay, I think I can do that really quickly too, and divide it into two parts. So the first one is start with your phone, and I think that you should just start with your phone regardless of whether you're going to get better equipment, which I also think you should get better equipment eventually. So either way, it's good to start with your phone because your phone has the Notes app. You can access Google Docs on it. And it also has a bunch of audio recording apps that you can use for all sorts of preliminary work to starting your podcast to begin with. So like practicing your podcast voice. Have you ever tried to record a podcast before? It's pretty awkward. And, you know, how do you get your voice to sound a certain way without sounding bad, you know, or embarrassing, right? Like, how do you sound like a podcaster without sounding like you're weird? Like this, for example, right? So all those things can be good. And then also there's apps on your phone like Anchor FM. There's some other ones too. Auphonic. But Anchor actually is an app that will also host your podcast for you as well. So it's a cool one to get started on. And then when you're ready to upgrade and actually, which is going to be step number 2 of this, Anchor is still a great host to go with as well. So start with your phone, and with your phone, just make some practice recordings, make a bunch of practice recordings, listen back to the recordings and adjust your phone accordingly. Like you'll hear the recordings, you'll hear that you make a little too many noises.
So gonna get familiar with the sound of your voice and what's a good audio recording and what's a not so good audio recording.
Yeah, and pay attention to the recordings and listen. You'll hear if you can hear reverb in there. Put some headphones on and listen.
What's reverb?
Well, reverb and echo is in your room. So if you're in, you know, we're all very familiar with how a bathroom sounds, has a sound to it because it's very reverberated. Or if you're in a grand hall or you're out in a concrete parking garage, right? You clap and echo, echo, echo. Those kind of things exist just in our regular bedrooms too, and where we're going to, in our apartment and where we're going to be recording our podcast. So really start getting familiar with how your recording sound in headphones, because that'll help you just right off the bat. And then from there, you move on to step number 2. And the equipment that you need really to get started is just a USB microphone and to get onto a computer. And if you don't have access to a computer, I'd really think about investing in just a very inexpensive laptop. The cheapest one you can get will be just fine. Luckily, audio production doesn't take a lot of CPU power. So if you're going to be editing video, that's a whole nother situation. But when we're editing audio, the cheapest laptop they make now is perfectly okay to use. So just get a USB microphone that you can plug into that laptop. The laptop powers that USB microphone and makes it so you can get really good recordings.
And I've seen people using headphones. I've seen you using headphones. Do they need headphones?
Yes, you need headphones because you need to hear your recordings after the fact. Because you're not going to be a lazy podski. You're going to do your research and you're going to actually learn how to make at least very minor edits. And you'll need headphones to be able to hear making those edits. The speakers, as it plays off of your phone, isn't enough because you're still inside of a room and you're going to hear your room with those speakers. It's really nice to get isolated in the headphones. And I would say the majority of podcast listeners are probably listening on headphones. So you are going to put yourself in the same audio environment that your listeners are in by getting headphones. The other reason I really like headphones and would recommend them is to have them while you're recording, like I do right now. I can actually hear my voice coming back into my headphones. And that can be a little hard to get used to because we're not used to that. But for me, it helps me to stay in what I call the sweet spot in front of the microphone. And that's something you can start experimenting with too. With your phone too. Just if you take the microphone 2 inches in one direction or the other direction, or 2 or 3 inches away from your mouth, then the sound changes. And if the microphone's 2 feet away from your mouth, the sound's going to change. And typically on most microphones, the closer you are to it, the better, really, without making popping noises. So you can kind of put your phone or the microphone, your USB microphone, at an angle, coming into your mouth at an angle. So all of that air that comes out of your mouth goes past the microphone. And you can hear all those things better if you're in headphones. If you're not wearing headphones, you can't hear the popping noise that you're making. And just try it. So put on some headphones, listen to how your microphone sounds. Most all of the USB microphones have a little jack where you can plug in headphones into them. And that will allow you to actually monitor your voice, is what they call it. And you can monitor your voice as you're recording. And then move your head around and see how much the audio. I'm moving my head around right now, and you'll hear you have to compensate in editing. It gets weird. You want to train yourself to stay in that sweet spot and to get the best sound out of your voice. And you'll train yourself as you podcast more and more to not move your head very much. Your head will start getting very still and staying in the sweet spot.
Do you have a preference when it comes to USB microphones? There are so many.
No, not really.
Or headphones.
Headphones.
What's your favorite USB microphone?
My favorite USB microphone is the Samson Q2U. I also really like the Audio-Technica ATR 2100X. We'll leave the links for both of those in this episode's description. The 2100X, the ATR or Audio-Technica, it's a little more expensive than the Samson Q2U. I think it's $130 or something right now. The prices change every now and then, so you'll have to check the description. And then the Samson Q2U is great. A ton of people use the Samson Q2U. The reason both those are my favorite is because they double as an XLR microphone too. And that's basically just the adapter, but that means that you can use it with like an audio interface or with equipment in the future. So when you're starting, you can use it with a USB, just with your computer. But if you want to grow and you want to get better sounds, the mics are upgradable. Mm-hmm. So that's why they're my two favorites.
So microphone, headphones, a microphone stand, I'm guessing.
Oh, and yes, accessories. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so headphones, a microphone stand, both the ATR 2100X and the Samson Q2U microphones and all USB microphones come with a little doinky stand. And that stand's not going to be good for you because you're going to have to DIY something to make those doinky stands work. It's better just to get a stand. They're very affordable. I'll put 2 stands also in the description of this episode. One is just a desk stand, and those are cool because they clamp to your desk. Those will actually hold the microphone up by your mouth. So that's why the doinky stands that come with USB microphones, the microphone stands, they keep them like, if you're sitting comfortably, they'll be pointing at your chest. Mm-hmm. So you want a nice stand that actually brings the microphone so you can sit comfortably, but have the microphone right next to your mouth. And you can also get something like that for your smartphone. We have a video on YouTube, actually, where you'll also see a link in this episode's description. You can check that out. Veronica does a really cool job with that. That's it, really. That's all you need. A USB microphone, a laptop computer, and a microphone stand and headphones. Now, the USB microphones will also come with something called a windscreen, or Veronica likes to call them poofies. And they're these little poofy foam pieces that go over the top of your microphone. Those are great. They help with plosives, which are those P sounds. And they'll help you get a little better sound out of the microphone. And they'll also allow you to get a little closer to it. Both of those microphones I mentioned are a little temperamental. You're going to need to take a lot of test recordings with those too, move your mouth around in different variations and just make some test recordings. That's a really good time to be outrageous and make fun of yourself and develop your own podcast voice. And then the other thing you can get is a pop filter in addition to those poofies. And a lot of times pop filters come with microphone stands. Nowadays, it's just part of the Amazon pack. And those are just these little circular screen looking things that stop air from passing through. And they're pop filters. They filter out the pop noises, right? Those are pretty simple and easy to install on your mic stand that you buy. And we have all of the information, if you want, you can find actually right where you're listening to this episode.
Cool. But a question that I had while you were explaining the equipment is there are a lot of people using Zoom, working from home, connecting remotely and doing all that. Does this setting, all the equipment that you mentioned, would this work for that kind of setting too? Can it be used for podcasting and for connecting to Zoom meetings and stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it will also work perfectly for anybody that you might want to connect with you and be on your podcast. And there's solutions you can get that actually are a little better audio quality than Zoom too for that. One's called Riverside FM and the other one's called Squadcast FM, both really cool remote recording solutions as well to get high quality audio recordings remotely. And yeah, those USB microphones are perfect for that because they just plug right into your computer. So they're portable. You can take them on the road and also you're connected to your computer. So if somebody calls you on a Zoom call or even on a FaceTime, all of our laptops basically just recognize the USB microphone when we plug it in. Sometimes you do have to find your system preferences or something like that on your computer. You go into that settings wheel, right? And you find your audio input or audio output and just make sure that it says the name of your microphone. Mm-hmm. And that's about the extent of the tech savviness you'll need to have is just, can you find that audio input, which can be a little tricky, but you'll get it.
So if you're here in North Carolina and you want to podcast with your brother who's back in Utah, then
I could do that very easily.
You can do that very easily. And this is the kind of equipment that you would recommend.
Yeah, for him especially.
And then you would connect using
We would connect using Riverside.fm or Squadcast FM.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So now let's move on to the next question. And that is the confusion. And that's something that I experienced myself between a USB microphone and an XLR microphone. Is it better to have a USB microphone? Do you get better audio with an XLR? What's the difference? What is your recommendation?
That's a really awesome question. The difference between a USB microphone and an XLR microphone, without getting way too tech jargony, is just the input. It's like the output or how the microphone is being turned on, you could say, in the most simple ways of saying it. And then also how the audio from the microphone is being converted into like digital numbers on your computer, essentially, right? Because it starts as our voice and then the microphone magically turns it into electricity. And then there's something that has to turn that electricity into numbers that can be recorded on our computer. Is that too complicated?
No, if I'm following this because it isn't.
Okay, cool. So basically,
you see my blank stare.
When you get a USB microphone, it's really not any different than an XLR microphone. It's the same technology. The big difference is it's a microphone plus an audio interface. It's a microphone that has an audio interface included in it. It's like a combo unit. But you just say USB microphone because that's the output. So when you plug that USB microphone into your computer, there's a microphone element that's going on, and then there's an audio interface element that's going on.
All in one. Inside the microphone.
And the first thing that happens in the electric path, you could say, or in the signal path, the first thing that happens is the microphone changes your voice into electricity. Then after that, the electricity goes into an audio interface. And the audio interface changes that electricity into ones and zeros.
And it's transferred to the computer.
Yeah. And to get even more complex, it's called an AD converter, which stands for analog to digital converter. That's one of the things an audio interface has inside of it. It's a little computer chip.
Okay.
So you get that all in one microphone. But as you might imagine, in combo unit type electronics,
there's limitations.
There's usually quality limitations, right? Because you're paying $100 for a microphone and an audio interface. So an XLR microphone is just a microphone. It doesn't have an audio interface built into it, which means the whole $100 that you pay for that, that's really going into the microphone technology itself. So it's going to be a better microphone. It's just going to it'll be better built. It'll have different electronics, different components in it that do a better job of turning our voice into electricity. right? And they also add certain qualities to that electrical sound as well. Some microphones sound warm and bassy. Some of them sound really high end or really hissy kind of, because they pick up different frequencies and they perform differently in changing the vibrations in the air into electricity. So once the microphone changes our voice into an electricity, it needs somewhere to go. And that's where you plug in what's called an XLR cable into the XLR input on this microphone. And then the electricity will run through that cable. And on the other end of it, you'll need to plug it into something. And that's when you plug it into an audio interface. And that audio interface, like I just said, changes that electricity into numbers. And then the audio interface will have a USB cable on it that goes into your computer. And then it's the same thing that happened. It's just now you're separating them. And so now you pay $100, $200, $500 for a microphone. And then you pay $100, $200, $1,000 for an audio interface. And now all of the little important points in the process of your audio production are very good quality. You have a really good quality microphone that's doing a really good job of turning your voice into electricity. Then you have a really good quality cable that can take that electricity to the audio interface. Then you have a really good quality audio interface that has really fine-tuned technology that captures a lot of little millions and millions of pictures of that electricity to get a super accurate, clean and crisp transduction, or you could call it a translation almost of the electricity, and then turn that into a digital thing.
So at that point, what's left to worry about as far as good quality sound would be your environment and also your microphone technique.
Yes, your environment and also your microphone technique. Yep.
Because it doesn't help that you have that kind of a setup if your environment is not.
Yeah, you can have a $3,000 microphone and a $3,000 preamp and a $3,000 audio interface and all that, and be recording in a bathroom, and it's still going to sound like crap. Or be 10 feet away from your $3,000 microphone.
Okay.
It's still going to sound like crap. You got to get nice up and close on that thing. You got to keep yourself from getting too many plosives by speaking directly into the microphone, or not having a pop filter. So those kind of things.
Then I would ask you to tell me what's your favorite setup as far as XLR microphones and audio interfaces. You can start from the very basic and talk about costs compared to USB microphones. And also like go up to the most expensive ones, but not needed for audio, like advanced audio production, like music production, but just podcasting.
Yeah. Okay. That's also really cool. And luckily this question is so common that I can sum it up pretty quickly, I think.
Okay.
The first step, like I said, is USB microphone and your computer. With that, we already talked about those microphones. Now we're on to XLR microphone and an audio interface and a computer. So here, the next step up from that would probably be the Focusrite. That's the name of the company, Audio Interfaces. And they have a very popular line of products right now called Scarlett. And they have audio interfaces that have a lot of different inputs. So the inputs allow you to record more than one microphone at a time, which is something you can't do with a single USB microphone. There's some workarounds with that if you have a few different USB microphones, but we're not going to go there. So it would be an XLR microphone plugged into an audio interface. And right now the Scarlett is a great affordable option for that. What I find with the Focusrite with those consumer products is that they are consumer products. They're sold at a very good price. And like you might imagine, that technology, because of that, is sort of limited, but it's actually really good. However, the audio interfaces are really not that much fancier than the audio interface that's inside of a USB microphone. And the microphone technology on those microphones is pretty good too. So if you get just standard, let's say a Shure SM58 is your standard microphone that you see people use on stage. Anytime you see a picture of a handheld microphone, that's what you're probably seeing is a Shure SM58. It's very recognizable. That microphone is definitely superior, I would say, to the Audio-Technica we talked about or the Samson Q2U. But when you plug that directly into a Focusrite, it's going to be very comparable to the USB microphone setup. Where you really start getting into the professional, more really high quality sound. And what I mean by that is the reproduction of it. Like, how real to life does it sound? When you're listening to an NPR show, it sounds like you're like in the room, almost like you're in the head of that person, right? Like you just have this cinematic kind of feeling. It's almost like the equivalent of a high definition picture. And it's very much like that actually, because the higher quality of the audio interface, the higher quality little pixels you could say it's taking of the sound. Because that's what an audio interface does. It takes a ton of pictures, millions of pictures per second of a sound, right? I like to say each point in the signal chain, the quality of each one of those points determines the overall quality of your sound. And the first point is your voice. So the quality of your voice, you know, and then the second point is the microphone, then the microphone cable, like I said, and then the audio interface. Inside the audio interface, there are very important components to know about if you really want to get professional and speak the jargon of sound professionals, only for podcasting though. And I know I can see your eyes are getting a little glossed over. And so I'm sure that's happening to the listeners and they're like, oh, okay, I'm done. But inside of an audio interface, just hang with me, there is something.
Which is this square little piece of equipment with knobs.
With knobs, yeah. It's a square piece, a little rectangular piece of equipment. The scarlet ones I'm talking about, you can go
It looks like a DVD player, a Blu-ray player.
Looks like a little mini Blu-ray player, right? What it's doing is changing electricity into numbers for my computer so that I can see these waveforms of what I recorded so that I can chop them up and move them around in an audio editing system on my computer. We see that all the time. That should kind of make sense, right? But inside the audio interface, there's a bunch of stuff going on. And you only really need to know about two things. One is the AD and the DA converter. That's what I said, analog to digital. So there's something that turns that electricity, transforms it into digital numbers. And then there's something that takes those digital numbers from your computer and transforms them back into electricity again. So it can go up this little cable and into your headphones. That's called the DA converter, which is just the opposite, digital to audio converter. The quality, especially of the AD converter, is super, super important. And you're going to get higher quality. And right now, they're just little chips. They're little computer chips. But if you take these pieces of equipment apart and you look at the chips, even just looking at them, you can see some of them are way higher quality. They're just bigger. They're beefier. They look more like a science fiction movie. You're like, yeah, that's going to sound better, right? Who knows the technology that goes into it? These people are geniuses. But we don't need to, we're not worried about how any of that stuff. And it's hard for me not to go off on that. So I apologize if I'm going off too much. So the other really important component inside of an audio interface is a preamp. And a preamp is very important for audio production and has been since the very beginning times of audio production. Preamp or a preamplifier gives a microphone power. It adds beef to the microphone. It adds character. It adds volume. And it gives those microphones power so that they can pick up more accurate sound. And it also adds character, and I already said that, but that's the important thing. And so different preamps will have different characters to them.
I'm going to have to stop you right here because I want you to walk me through the setup. So we have the microphone, the XLR microphone, the XLR cable connected to the microphone. Then it connects to the audio interface.
Yes.
And then the audio interface connects to the preamp?
No, so that's what's so confusing about all of this. And so I'm glad you stopped me. The preamp is actually also just a little computer chip that's inside of that audio interface.
Oh, okay.
But the reason I'm bringing it up is because the real professional thing to do is to separate that and not even use the preamp in the audio interface.
But podcasters don't need to worry about
that. They can and they should if you want to take it to the next step, the next professional level.
Okay.
Because the audio interface itself has two components in it, but you can bypass the preamp component because every audio interface that you're going to have has a switch on it that will allow you to choose if you want to record mic or line. And you'll see that if you look at your audio interface, it will say mic, MIC/line, the way we spell line. And that little switch tells you, do I want to use an XLR cable or do I want to use what's called a TRS cable or what's like other people call it an instrument cable. And it's more of a pokey stabby thing and not so much a 3 prongs. There's just one big 1/4 inch prong. It's a 1/4 inch cable. That's something you can bring in from, say, a keyboard or something that's what they call line level, like an instrument or your phone. So if you wanted to record sounds from your phone into this audio interface that you just purchased, you could. You wouldn't use an XLR cable. You would use some type of USB thing that converts it to 1/4 inch. And then you would put a 1/4 inch into the audio interface and you could record your phone. I wish you could see Veronica's eyes.
I hope you guys are following.
So, but it's important to understand, this needs to be broken down, but maybe if you just listen a few different times and then go take a look at your audio interface, it'll make sense. But when you use the line level in an audio interface, it's not giving the microphone power. The line level is just taking the electrical signal as it is and sending it directly to the AD converter. And so basically when I say there's a switch or a button on your audio interface, it says line and mic. If you push that button, it's basically just a selector between two different inputs. The one for line is going to be a 1/4 inch input. It's going to say use that one. If you select mic, it'll say, oh, use this input instead. And that's an XLR input. And a lot of these audio interfaces, they have a combo jack. And it's a jack that allows you to plug into it an XLR cable or a 1/4 inch TRS cable. So there's two different types of cables that you can plug into the input of your audio interface. Yeah. And there's one that's line and there's one that's mic. Mm-hmm. Well, mic makes sense.
You use the one for line when you are adding a preamp separate from your audio interface?
Yes, exactly.
So the signal would run through the audio interface or would run through both at the same time, or how is it?
Microphones always need power. So when we go back to a USB microphone, there's also a preamp inside that audio interface that's inside the USB microphone. There's a preamp that's giving that microphone power.
I'm learning to.
And that power is being ran to the microphone from the USB port from your computer. Mm-hmm. Right. But in the case of inserting your own preamp, which is how you're going to start hacking your sound and sounding like your damn NPR, mm-hmm. how you're going to do that is using a professional preamplifier and not the ones that come in the audio interfaces.
Okay.
And it's really cool because there's tons you can buy. There's so many really awesome preamps. I'll leave a link to a couple ones, affordable ones.
But that didn't answer my question. Like, how does that work?
So here's how it works. A microphone always needs a preamp, no matter what kind of microphone it is. Yeah. It needs to have power. So you take the microphone and you don't plug it into the audio interface. You would just kind of follow the signal. Think about that. Think about, okay, there's a microphone. It needs power. So the next place it would go to is a preamp. So that's where you would buy an external piece of equipment. So it would look like another DVD player. So you'd buy another DVD player looking thingy, majingy, mm-hmm. and that would be a preamp. And that is going to be its own thing. And the $600 or $3,000 you spend on that preamp is the only reason that piece of equipment was built was mm-hmm. to give a microphone power. So it's going to do a really good job of that one thing. Mm-hmm. And that one thing is critical to the reproduction of audio, So mm-hmm. you speak into the microphone, you send that cable into a preamp. Then at the back of the preamp, there's an output. You send the output of what's going through that preamp into the line input of your audio interface. Mm-hmm.
And then from the audio interface to the computer.
And then from the audio interface's output, which is usually USB, mm-hmm. and then that USB cable into your computer.
Oh, okay.
And then what's crazy is it kind of loops back out because then you do stuff to it on your computer and then you press the space bar for play and it plays back. So it goes back into the audio interface through the electric cable into your headphones. And you're listening to the magic of audio reproduction.
So in that case, what's more important, the preamp or the microphone?
I would say the preamp. And a good preamp, you can use a Shure SM58. And I would just say this because I've done so many tests on it. And I think a lot of audio nerds would agree, is mm-hmm. you take an SM58 and you put it through a $3,000 preamp. It sounds amazing. Mm-hmm. But you take an SM58 and you put it directly into a Zoom recorder where it has this little chip that's its preamp. I mean, think about the difference between a little computer chip, like mm-hmm. you can barely hold it in your finger, versus a whole big machine that has all these electronics in it. Mm-hmm. You get a different sound, you get a different character.
Is it worth it for podcasting? Is it like I can understand if somebody is an audio engineer, a sound geek. But
so hopefully this fulfilled both of those questions and you can think to yourself, okay. And the answer is probably no. You actually don't need to ever get to that level, really. And so maybe that whole idea I went on, but we've never really gone that deep on our podcast.
And it's like good for me to understand too.
Yeah. So why not? Let's go there. But that whole thing I went on, that's how you're going to hack it. If you want to sound like NPR, that's how you're going to do it. You're going to mm-hmm. have to go microphone, preamp, audio interface, mm-hmm. computer. Mm-hmm. But most of us can just go microphone, audio interface, computer, because there's audio interfaces other than the Scarlett or the Focusrite ones I just talked about that actually have really good little computer chip preamps. Very impressive ones, actually. So you can start there and because we're just recording voices, we'd never really need to get so high quality preamps. But if you wanted to, you're going to need to spend at least $800 minimum to get a decent preamp to make the whole thing worth it. So we're talking really professional applications. But I think all of us should dream that big. I think all of us should imagine ourselves talking in a $5,000, $6,000 voice setup.
Yeah, because why not?
Why not? And your voice will sound really
Bougie.
buttery and delicious. So basically those audio interfaces to end this question that I would recommend is anything by Apogee. That's Apogee. I'll leave the link here. Is a really cool company that makes really good preamps inside of their audio interfaces. So it's just one audio interface, and Apogee Elements is the series, and you can pick those up for like $600, $800. So the Focusrite audio interfaces, which is the really basically the same thing as USB microphones. If you're going to be using that level, if you're going to pay $100, $200 for your audio interface, it's really only because you need to record more than one microphone at the same time. Otherwise, just get a USB microphone. It's comparable in sound quality. If you want to get better quality, really professional quality, all you really need is a good microphone, something $100, $200, a real, or you can get like the real podcast microphone would be the Shure SM7B. That's what everybody calls it, the Joe Rogan microphone, but all the professional podcasters use the SM7B. That's a really cool microphone. And then, or you could get the Electro Voice RE20. These links will be where you're listening to this episode. You can go geek out. We'll just leave our podcast gear builder list you can go look at that we have for our podskis. And those are professional microphones that are in the $400 range. And that's so now instead of having a $100 USB microphone, now you're looking at $400 for a real microphone, and then $400 to $800 for a real audio interface for something that gets into not consumer anymore and more into this brand of this
professional.
Well, not professional yet. It's actually called prosumer.
Prosumer.
Yeah. So it's the next level. And that middle level is really all podcasters ever need to get to, like legitimately to have a badass sounding podcast. That middle level is just fine. The other level is just because we cool. We flashy up there. You know what I mean? That's that level. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about the setup. We talked about the equipment. We talked about the difference between USB and XLR microphones. Thank you for explaining that. That was very clear, and I understood everything.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
okay.
I did.
I had a lot of hand movements going on, so hopefully for the listener, if you need those hand movements, we have videos and stuff. The hand movements.
But I was paying attention.
Okay, cool.
So we walked through the whole equipment. But now we're going to need a piece of software to process our voices, to process our recordings. And that's when I want you to explain what is a DAW. I want you to be real with me as somebody who has not any audio training, audio editing training. Like, is it easy to learn? Is it too complicated? Can I learn it in a week, or is it going to take me months? Too many questions, but I just want you to talk to me about DAWs and what's your favorite.
This is really cool too, and a big concern. And like, you know, as we start going down this pathway of podcasting and we Google everything, this is why it gets so overwhelming. And I think a lot of people shy away from it, especially people who aren't really tech. They don't like the techie stuff, right? What's a DAW is a digital audio workstation. It's audio editing software and allows us to take those numbers that we just recorded and visualize them. Actually, I think is one of the best things it does. And you're probably familiar with what a waveform looks like. All of us are, because a lot of these applications we use, even the video editing like iMovie that we have on a lot of our computers, we get a visual representation of the audio file that was recorded along with the video sometimes too. So we're used to what those audio waveforms look like. And these DAWs allow us to look at those audio waveforms and cut them almost in blocks and in pieces. You can call them regions, or some of the DAWs call them items, or some of them call them, I think that it's item or region, whatever, right? These little blocks where you have one big chunk of the whole 40 minutes you just recorded. Now you can take that chunk and you can dissect it. You can cut out 5 minutes from the middle. You can trim a little bit at the beginning and the end and make that rectangle smaller, and then cut it up into puzzle pieces. You can even rearrange the time of it. You could also then record just a separate intro. Let's say you wanted to record an intro piece, like say, hey, welcome to my podcast. It's this, this, and this. And then you put a little music behind it. And you want that to play every time in every one of your podcast episodes. Well, DAW would let you do that. You'd open up a project in your DAW, kind of like a Word document. It just has audio pictures instead of words. You just open that up in your DAW, you record your voice into it by pressing a record button. Most DAWs make the record button very easy to find, and they've made it very consumer friendly. So it's very easy to get a DAW and to get in there and start learning. YouTube is wonderful for this. We actually have our own YouTube videos that teach you how to get started in a lot of these programs. I'm about to put together a Reaper one, which you'll find very shortly on our YouTube channel. That brings me to answer kind of your first question, which is it easy? Is it intimidating? Yes, it's intimidating. It's kind of hard to get started, and to do really advanced editing and to do the work that can really take your podcast to places audio-wise is pretty intimidating and will take some time to learn. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard to find that information too, at least currently, because it's scattered all over YouTube, and you have to be dedicated. It's not really concise in one place. And unfortunately, DAWs, most of them are also primarily used for music production and for film production. As you can imagine, there's a lot more audio tracks, instruments, different microphones. There's a microphone that's going to record a bass guitar differently than a voice. There's a microphone that's going to record a drum set different than a voice. So that's when you get into the real audio nerdy stuff. So because all these real audio nerds are using these DAWs, the interfaces of how these DAWs, they look intimidating and complicated because they're built for music production. But they're actually not that complicated. You just start from the left side of the application, look at all the drop-down menus, see if you can make sense of the language, and just don't be intimidated. You got to get in there because you got to get some audio recorded in there. So with all that said, for us just getting started with podcasting, there's a lot of really cool solutions, and there's free solutions that you can use. GarageBand is pretty cool. I don't like GarageBand because it doesn't really allow you to do a crossfade, which is a big deal breaker for me. But for you just starting out, that's probably not going to be that big of a deal breaker. So GarageBand would be fine. Audacity is the other one that you hear people shouting from the rooftops about. Don't listen to that one. I really don't recommend Audacity. The best between Audacity or GarageBand would be Reaper. Reaper's free, basically. You can keep it free, but they're just going to constantly annoy you about upgrading. And I think just morally, it's good to upgrade because it's a great company and it's only a one-time $60. But if you want to stay free with Reaper forever, it seems like at least right now, that's a possibility. You just have to constantly be like, nope, I'll subscribe later, basically. But Reaper's amazing. Really good technology. Really streamlined. It's called Reaper or Reaper FM. You'll find the link below. I've tried to contact the Reaper company because I'm like a spokesperson for them. I love them, but I can't get a hold of anyone there. And it's a really cool company. They have a lot of plugins. Everything you need works for PC and Mac. You can just get in there and get started right off the bat. I like it so much I actually put a course together. It's called Reaper for Podcasters. If you really want to take, I would say it would take you about a week or two to get through that course. But you got to focus and dedicate yourself and actually go through the course. But when you're through the other side, you'll realize, oh yeah, that was a lot simpler than I thought. It always seems a lot more complex than it is getting into it. Or you can just learn the very basics, which is what most of us do, about how to get a really nice looking waveform. What should a nice waveform look like? What does a waveform look like when it distorts? And what does my waveform that I'm recording look like when my level's not up enough? Remember I said that preamp? That's on all of our audio interfaces. We can turn that up and that will make the waveform look a little better, or we can turn it down and that'll keep the waveform from looking distorted. So there's just these basic operations you got to learn as far as getting, the old expression is getting audio to tape or getting that waveform to your digital audio workstation. And so I would recommend Reaper, and Reaper goes all the way up to the very professional levels, and it's only $60. However, there's other really good ones too. Adobe Audition is incredible, and that comes together with the Adobe Creative Cloud. And the Creative Cloud comes with a subscription to Photoshop, Lightroom, which is perfect for editing photos, Adobe Premiere, which is, I would say, the go-to professional version of video editing that most professional independent video editors use. So the Creative Cloud is $50 a month. And then there's Pro Tools, which is my baby. But Pro Tools versus Reaper is a one-time $600 for the basic Pro Tools. There's a lot of other fees associated with that. And I don't think most podcasters need to get to that level, even the ones who want to edit like crazy and nerd out on the audio. So that hopefully answers that question. Is Reaper's the one you should use. Look no further. Just go to reaper.fm. It's a 2-month free trial, they say, and then a one-time $60 after that. There's a lot of beginning videos. You can check out our channel to get started on it. I also have a Get Started in Reaper free masterclass you can go to. You can tell I'm a Reaper enthusiast because I think it's a perfect solution for podcasters and for people who've been stuck in the Audacity nightmare, I call it. Audacity's famous for crashing. It also does something called destructive recording. That's no good. That's not a good thing. We want non-destructive recording in our DAWs, and Reaper has that. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was great. So this takes me to my next question. And it's, should I DIY my editing or should I hire a professional to do the editing for me?
I think that's actually a pretty easy question to answer. Hold on, I'm going to pop open my Perrier
Energize. Perrier Energize, if you're listening, we'd love for you to sponsor us.
Woo! Woo! We've been going a while. That question can really, if like you were a client asking me that, is really easy to answer. And it's with how much time do you have every week would be a question I would ask you. So how much time do you have every week to put into your podcast post-production? I would insist with you, because I love you and I want your podcast to go places, that you have to put that post-production into it one way or another.
You love me?
I do, yeah.
Oh, I love you too.
Oh, thank you. But I love our podskis too. So even if you were a podski I didn't know who was coming to me saying that, I would say that too. I would say, hey, I love you and I want your show to go places. You can't have a podcast without a post-production process, okay? So there's got to be at least a process. The minimum time would be an hour, I would think, on any podcast episode. And the normal or the average time should probably be around 3, just for processing your audio, maybe 2, depending on your show. That needs to get done, and you can absolutely do it yourself, but it's going to take you a couple weeks of pulling your hair out to get good at it, okay? And so you're going to have to dedicate yourself a few days for a couple weeks to pull your hair out, and then you'll get good enough at it that you can get going. And then from that point, you can learn as you go. And then you're also going to have to dedicate 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours every time you record a podcast episode to get that thing to sound the way you want it to. After you get through about 10 episodes or so, you'll get faster. You'll find ways, your own workflow. You'll find your own workflow that saves you time. You'll pre-record chunks and stick them in there. You'll be an audio wizard in no time because you're going to be using that DAW every week. You just got to get in there and start playing with it. But for a lot of us, I think that hiring an editor is the best way to go, because they're just so good and they know so much that would take you many years probably to be where they are. They're audio nerds and they're great at what they do, and they like to nerd out on this kind of stuff, right? And there's so many good editors out there that you can get people to kind of fit with your style and do things you want them to do exactly how you imagine. And they're very affordable too, as it's becoming more of a thing and podcasting is growing. It's getting easier and easier to find a good, decent podcast editor that you can trust. It becomes really streamlined workflow. So I would say, I would also ask you, like, what kind of control do you want? What's your tech background would be the question I would ask. Are you willing to put 2 minimum hours a week into post-production? Willing, and do you actually have that time in your schedule? And do you like playing around on the computer? Do you like learning new things? Would it interest you to learn about compression? Would it interest you to learn what a gate is, or a de-esser, or EQ? Does that sound fun? If that stuff sounds fun, then you should start learning how to edit. I think it's an art form. Get your creative juices flowing. It's good for your brain. It's just good. And it's a good thing a skill to take with you places. And it translates into a lot of other places besides podcasting. I think you'd be surprised. And it's just good. We should always be learning new things. Mm-hmm. And what's cool about learning an audio editing software too, is it's strikingly similar to video editing and to other other software programs that use a timeline, a mathematical timeline as their edit window. So all of a sudden you realize, oh man, now that I got good at Reaper, I'm sliding into this video editing because the natural progression from podcasting is getting into video. You're already going to be pretty good at editing video. It's pretty much the same. Now you just see the audio waveform and the image from the camera, but it's all the same functions. And so now you're a multimedia content creator. You're a pro. You've got that you can add to your toolkit. That's an actual asset, and I would encourage you to do so. But that all, again, comes down to goals, and that's why I can't answer that directly, because it's based off you, the podski that's asking me that question. And so those are the questions. Do you have the time? Do you have the desire? And then the other thing is, well, actually, I don't have the time and I do want to hire an editor, but I don't have that money to hire that editor. So can I learn enough to have a good show without having the budget for an editor? Because more of us are there than aren't there, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where, you're going to need to learn to edit so that you can edit your own show. You're going to have to spend at least an hour minimum. And there's Reaper.fm. And then the other one I forgot to mention that's really cool, but also would cost similar to what it would cost an editor, is kind of the problem, is Descript. Descript allows you to edit your podcast like you would a Word document. We love Descript, but Descript is a monthly subscription. And actually, no, Descript would be a lot cheaper than a podcast editor, especially just their very basic subscription. And Descript is constantly updating. They just did an update that allows you to actually beef up your audio and add some of those audio effects just by pressing a button. And seriously, if you can edit a Word document, you can edit your podcast. It's incredible, the technology. It also makes transcripts for you too, so that now your podcast episode can be turned into a transcript and used as blog post or copy for your social media. So those are your two go-to options for newbies, Reaper.fm and Descript. What's cool about both of those is they collaborate with each other. You can actually take your Descript edit and pull it into Reaper after the fact. So you can get really fancy. And that's something that I actually do. I love that workflow. So just telling you heart to heart, Podsky, like this is going to be a really fast workflow for you, is to get Descript. I wouldn't record my audio into Descript because I find I get better audio quality elsewhere, but they're working on that too. I just like the recording functionality in like Reaper, but then or anywhere. And then you take that audio, you pull it into Descript, you edit it, you chop it up into Descript by like you would a Word document, and Descript allows you to listen at 2 times and even 3 times speed. So think about that. If you make an hour-long episode, well, now I only have to spend a half an hour listening back to it. And that's how I've been able to, after years, if you give me an hour recording and you say, Studio Steve, will you edit this for me? I want you to put all the bells and whistles on it. How long will it take you? I can do it in about an hour, actually. But that's after years of experience. And how I do that is by using Descript. Descript's what took me from my 2-hour mark down to an hour. They've cut my workflow in half. And the podcast editors we work with are kind of about down to that too.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So kind of to wrap up this interview, it's been intense.
Has it been intense?
Intense.
Oh, good.
So I want you to share some quick tips to improve your audio.
Okay. The obvious one is going to be microphone technique, and graduate from your phone into a USB microphone. There's the first one, upgrade your gear. And the second one, I'm going to lump together mic technique and your recording environment. So start critically thinking about what your sound sounds like. Listen back to your sound in headphones. Maybe hang up some curtains or get some acoustic foam pieces from Amazon or wherever else. Put them on your walls so that when you clap your hands, when you yell really loud in your room, you don't hear a reverb tail. And number 3, learn about some post-processing effects or plugins. There's a lot of post-processing plugins that's the digital version of a piece of machinery now. It's just a picture of the old piece of machinery that you used to have in your studio. Now you just get the digital picture of it. There's really cool plugins. That's something you just have to learn about, because we could spend a whole episode just on plugins, and maybe we will in the future if Veronica can handle it. But plugins to look out for would be compressors, and then specifically noise reduction. And the noise reduction technology is really cool. Reaper has a really cool plugin in it that will completely eliminate your noise. So if I have a fan going on in the background, Reaper can just take that fan out of there. It analyzes the fan noise and it takes it out of there. You just have to record the fan noise. Bonus 4th tip, capture room tone. Because even if you're working with an editor, they love having that room tone. And you want to capture the room tone on every microphone you have. Press record, and everyone involved is completely silent for like 5 seconds. Don't breathe or anything, any noise in front of the microphone. Just be completely silent for 3 seconds and get that recorded on that waveform inside your DAW. That will allow many of these softwares, even Audacity can do that. It will allow them to get that silence by itself and analyze it. It takes a picture of that sound of that noise so that it can just remove that noise from the audio. It's pretty cool. So that's it. Capture room tone, look into some post-processing plugins like limiters, compressors, de-essers, and noise reduction. And that's it, yeah.
Oh, great. Well, that was a lot of information.
Yeah. I mean, that was like a workshop, but I felt good about that. And I hope that people ingest this and learn a lot from it. And if you have any questions, you can hit me up on Twitter. I have a lot of links I can send you to. Again, there's that podcast gear builder list that we've done a pretty good job of separating the equipment into different tiers, like USB microphone, mid-level, and then professional level, where there's some preamps and headphones and mic stands and all the accessories that we can send you to. Those are our affiliate links on Amazon too. So if you click on them, we get a few pennies, which is pretty fun. So you can find that at the gear builder list, and that link is where you're listening.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. This was a joy.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at Pod Sound School, anywhere.
At Pod Sound School, anywhere. We even have a Pinterest.
Anywhere or everywhere?
Well, we're on TikTok.
Yeah.
We hang out on the Clubhouse sometimes.
Steven's been practicing TikTok dances.
Yes, and we're going to start incorporating
He's
TikTok.
He's going to do the WAP.
We're actually our TikTok is going to basically be a duplicate of our YouTube Shorts channel, kind of, that will be attached to our YouTube channel.
But are you going to do the WAP?
I will do the WAP. I will do it.
I don't know if that's a thing anymore.
It's chuggy.
It's chuggy.
All right, guys, we'll catch you on the next episode.
We love you.
Happy casting.
Happy casting.
Because we've had enough of this nonsense.
And there you have it, Podski. What did you think of this episode? Slide into our DMs and let us know.
We make this show for you, and we'll love to learn your feedback. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at Pod Sound School. Make sure you share a screenshot of this episode and tag us so we can give you some love on the Instas.
Yeah, and if you're interested in our feedback, we do pod audits most Thursdays live in our Facebook community, Podcasting for Bosses. These are 30-minute coaching sessions where we dissect your podcast, your social media, and your content. You'll find the sign-up sheet inside the group, podsoundschool.com/community.
And until next time,
happy casting,
amigos!